So the three main living groups of primates include lemurs and their relatives, tarsiers, and anthropoids, which are the group that includes monkeys and apes. And here's a general look at a primate phylogeny. So this is your last common ancestor of all primates, and lemurs and their relatives, bush babies, for instance, very, very cute animals. You've got them at the zoo. All of these were the first to branch off, and then tarsiers, also the first to branch off. And these groups don't even have opposable thumbs, right? But they do have forward-facing eyes, so they have that binocular vision, which allows you to triangulate your vision, right? If I see something in front of me, I see it with both my right eye and my left eye, and so I can triangulate and get the depth of that, how far away it is, more effectively, that depth perception. And you'll notice this if you try to say, put a pen cap on the end of a pen. If you close your eye and try to do it, it's much, much, much harder because you can't tell how far away it is. And then we get our anthropoids, which means human-like. And that includes New World and Old World monkeys. New World doesn't mean they're newer monkeys. It means they are monkeys in what at the time scientists were calling the New World, which means the Americas, North and South America. Old World monkeys are Asian and African. Technically, there is one monkey in Europe, but it's right on the edge. It's on the island of Gibraltar, and we just call it Europe because it's between Spain and Morocco, and England owns it for whatever reason. And then we get into the apes down here with gibbons through humans. Note that our closest relatives are the chimpanzees and the bonobos. Bonobos are called pygmy chimps, and these are sister species, very cool organisms, very intelligent when compared to other animals that are not us. And they share about 98.5% of their DNA with us. Right? So these are very, very close relatives. And obviously, there are a lot of differences between humans and the chimp groups, but a lot of similarities as well. Old and New World monkeys have been separated for quite a while. They're both monkeys, right? So they have a lot of similarities, but they've had separate adaptive radiations. Old World monkeys, again, Asia and Africa, have prehensile tails, which means they can grab things with their tails, branches and other things, whereas New World monkeys are not able to use their tails for that. They don't have prehensile tails. Here we can see a macaque, which is an Old World monkey, and here's a New World monkey that you might find, again, in like the Brazilian rainforest or something. The apes, which include us, as well as gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimps, bonobos, apes diverged from Old World monkeys 20 or 25 million years ago. So we are more closely related to Old World monkeys than New World monkeys, which makes sense because humans evolved in Africa. And here's a look at all of our closest relatives. We all have extensive parental care, and we all have very complex social units. But none of the social units are as complex as Homo sapiens, which is us. And in the grand scheme of 4.5 billion years of Earth and over 3.5 billion years of life, probably several hundred million years more than that, Homo sapiens have been around for about 200,000 years. And that's not very long. We are brand new. We still have that new species smell on us. And while we share a lot with our other ape cousins, there are a lot of differences. First of all, we have upright posture and we walk on 2 legs. We also have much larger brains. So mammals tend to have larger brains than most other organisms. Primates tend to have large brains for mammals. Apes tend to have large brains for primates, and we have large brains for apes. So very, very large brains. It's kind of what makes us us. And our brains are capable of language, symbolic thought, artistic expression, use of complex tools. Now, other organisms do some artistic expression, we think. Definitely use tools. But it's a level of degree more than kind, right? We use very complex tools. You can teach language to a gorilla, for instance, or a chimpanzee. You just can't teach them to talk in English, for instance, because they don't have the oral machinery. but you can teach them sign language, and they can have fairly large vocabularies, in the 80 to 100 word vocabulary. We also have reduced jawbones and jaw muscles, flatter faces and larger craniums, and a shorter digestive tract. And while our genomes are almost 99% identical to chimpanzees, that 1 to 1.5% is found largely in regulatory genes, which can have a much bigger impact on the actual phenotype, as we know from talking about Hox genes. And those who study human origins are paleoanthropologists, and they study hominins. And we used to call these hominids, but these are groups of organisms that are more closely related to humans than chimpanzees. So in that branch that went toward chimps and toward us, this is on the toward us branch. Not all of them are necessarily our ancestors, but they are all on that same branch with us. And we don't know exactly what that branch looks like, right? But these are the groups of hominins that we know about, and there are a lot of them, right? We think of ourselves as being kind of alone, but there have been lots of hominins. And again, not all of them led to us. A lot of them were other branches that went different ways from us. And for large periods of hominin history, there have been multiple species of humans around at the same time, right? Again, we are relatively recent, and we are the only species of hominin or of human now. But there were times when there may have been multiple around the world. And the earliest known hominins were 6 or 7 million years ago in Africa and had relatively small brains, but were just starting to spend a little bit more time on two legs, bipedally. Starting with Ardipithecus ramidus, did we get more frequent bipedalism. And 2 to 4 million years ago, we start to see what scientists call the Australopiths. And this is it's paraphyletic, so we don't think it's a single clade. We call a lot of different skeletons Australopiths, probably incorrectly, but they are showing signs of walking fully erect. And how do we know that they walk fully erect? Well, there are a couple of ways. First of all, you might look at the skeleton, right? The feet are going to be shaped a little bit differently, as are the toes. The hip and knee joints are going to be different because your legs are going to kind of bow in, right? If you look at humans, versus other mammals, our femurs bow in and then have a weird joint with our knees, and that's to keep our center of gravity straight when we're walking on two legs. And we kind of walk like this rather than like this. That's a terrible way to describe it. But you can watch an ape walk, and they sort of walk with their legs stick out more rather than are right underneath them. And all of these leave very specific anatomical evidence. But also, we have footprints. There are fossilized actual footprints in places near where we find Australopithecus from the same time period, and they clearly show bipedal walking. Australopiths are generally separated into two groups: robust, which have really sturdy skulls and powerful jaws, and gracile, which are slender and have lighter jaws. But by about 2 million years ago, hominins were essentially walking full-time bipedal and walking long distances. In fact, that's one of the advantages of bipedalism, is that you can walk long distances at a relatively brisk rate without burning that many calories, right? We're very efficient walkers. In addition to bipedalism, one of the other things that we associate most with humans is tool use. And the first hominin that was discovered that was clearly using tools was Homo habilis, which literally means handyman. And you can see fossils of tools. You can also see fossils of animals that clearly had been cut with like stone knives. There's a lot of evidence of tool use. And actually now it looks like hominins before Homo habilis were also using some level of tool, but Homo habilis was using lots of complex tools, and it's what we associate with tool making. Now we also know from a lot of biological research that birds use tools. Other primates use tools. So tool use isn't unique to us, but the complex tool use and learning, again, the level of degree rather than kind, is unique to us. You only need to pull this thing out to see how complex our tools have gotten as compared to other organisms. The first fully bipedal, large-brained hominid was Homo ergaster. These guys had brains that were much, much larger, much closer to what you see in Homo sapiens. They showed a significant decrease in sexual dimorphism compared to ancestors. So males and females looked a lot more alike. Again, kind of like what you see in Homo sapiens. We feel like we have a lot of sexual dimorphism, but we really don't. We're pretty similar in size and makeup. And this probably indicates more parental investment in child rearing. And here's a look at Homo ergaster. And Homo erectus was another fully bipedal hominin, and it was the first one to leave Africa and spread out amongst Europe and Asia. And that led to an adaptive radiation of hominins that were in lots of different places around the world and developed into different species, probably one of which was Neanderthals, which were found in Europe and the Near East from about 350,000 years ago to about 28,000 years ago. This is not that long ago. And so they shared the world with Homo sapiens, again, from about 200,000 years ago. They were thick-boned. They actually had larger brains. They seemed to be smart and very social. They buried their dead. They made hunting tools. And it seems like, again, they were not our ancestors. They were a separate but close branch. But it seems like they were close enough that there was some intermating, and a lot of humans have Neanderthal DNA, especially if you are of European or Near Eastern ancestry. So even though Homo erectus left Africa many hundreds of thousands of years earlier, Homo sapiens evolved from earlier hominins that stayed in Africa. And Homo sapiens appeared a little under 200,000 years ago. And every human being that's alive today evolved from this group, from Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens itself had to also make its way out of Africa. And they did that about 115,000 years ago, first into the Middle East, and then into the rest of Asia and Europe, and eventually, probably across the Bering Strait from Asia into the Americas. And that didn't happen until much more recently, certainly more than 15,000 years ago, maybe 35, 40,000 years ago. There are some timelines that are disputed between scientists that study this stuff, but relatively recently did humans find themselves in the Americas. But as they expanded, they ran into other hominins, right? Like Neanderthals in Europe. There were tiny little hominins found in Indonesia that underwent sort of island effect evolution and shrunk, and they're sometimes compared to hobbits, right? Homo floresiensis is an example. We are the first group to show evidence of sophisticated symbolic thought, and we pride ourselves on this. And 77,000 years ago, there are artistic carvings found in South Africa. There are also paintings found, for instance, in caves in France. This is an example of this carving. You can see it's very clear geometric shapes. There's nothing functional about this, right? It appears we did it because it looks nice. And so far as we know, we're the only organisms that have evolved to think about our universe and our place in the universe. And that makes us special, right? In a way, we are the universe evolving to a point where we can recognize and study the universe. There's something neat about that to me.